Shalom Aleichem Rabbi. We are starting Shiur on Perek Hagozel Eitzim, the 9th Perek of Bava Kamma. And this Perek really deals with if someone steals something and changes it, what happens? What is the din behind that? So, to give a little bit of Akdama, if you learned Perek Meruba on Daf Samech Vav Amid Aleph, the Gemara says as follows: Amar Rabba Шинוי, Kona, K'tiva, ותנינא. The idea is that if a Goslin takes something, he steals it, and he changes it, that is Kona to the Goslin. The Goslin has a kinyan now over that object. Comes from a pasuk and a Mishnah Brisa. So where does it come from in the pasuk? K'tiva, v'heishefes Hagozel asher Hagozel. The Torah says, "You shall return the object that which was sold." So ma tama loimer asher Hagozel. What do we learn out of asher Hagozel? The Hainu. The Torah says v'heishefes Hagozel. If I just had v'heishefes Hagozel, I would know that there's a chiyuv hashava when I steal something, right? So if I take something, I have to give it back. Says the Gemara, so what is the riboy asher Hagozel, or the miyut of asher Hagozel? Is it coming to limit something? Is it coming to include something? So, in this situation, says the Gemara, im ke'in shegazel yachsir, if the item is in the same physical form, it hasn't changed from that which was stolen, then you have a chiyuv hashava, okay? But ve'im lav damim ba'alma ba'lishlume. So if you if the item is different from that when it was taken, then you have to pay damim, you have to pay keren, or the principal value. And we'll discuss later in our Mishnah clearly when you start paying and at what time do we evaluate the value from. But basically what we're saying here is the drasha is that asher Hagozel is a miyut, it's coming to exclude something. When do you not have the chiyuv of hashava? When the item is different, okay? So, to give a little bit of background on that, we see in the Rishonim and Achronim idea of takanos hashavim. So, basically the idea being, if let's say I take boards, right? And I make a cupboard out of it, or a bookshelf, right? And I took those boards, I stole those boards from Reuven, and I made the cupboard out of it, or the break front, or whatever it is, and I sell it to Shimon. So, and now Shimon is paid for his cupboard. So, what's going to happen? Reuven's going to find out I stole the boards, and he's going to find out I sold those boards in the form of a cupboard to Shimon. So, Reuven's going to come along to Shimon and say, hey, give me my boards back. Says the Torah, we don't want that sort of situation to happen. So we're going to limit the chiyuv hashava to protect Shimon in his purchase, and then the tvia is really between Reuven and the Goslin. Okay, so the idea being here is. Shimon bought a cupboard. He had no reason to suspect at the time that he was buying stolen merchandise, even if he had heard that Reuven had boards stolen from him. So he had done all his due diligence about his purchase, and the Torah comes along to protect him. That's essentially the way I understand it here. So, with that background, there comes a question that we're going to have to answer at certain points of our Perek. And that question is, does the Torah create an incentive through Шинוי Kona of the Goslin profiting from his actions? And does it make sense that the Torah would create such a rule in order to protect in every situation that will come about where this situation presents itself, the object is different than when it was stolen? So let's go through the Mishnah and see what we're holding by here. So says the Mishnah, Hagozel, Eitzim, Vasa, and Kalin. A Gazlan steals boards and he makes a cupboard out of it. He makes a tool out of it. He makes Kalin, tools, essentially, or pottery, or whatever it may be. He stole the boards and he made something else out of it, okay? Semer Vasan Begadim, he stole wool and he made clothing out of it. Mishalim Kishas Agzela, he pays back the nigzal, the value of the object from when it was stolen. So very easy to understand. Reuven goes to Shimon and into Shimon's house at night, steals wool, makes clothing out of it, and sells it to Pinchas. Right. So if the Gazlan is caught, Pinchas does not have a chiyuv hashava to the nigzal. Rather, the Gazlan has to pay for the value of the tzemer at the time it was stolen. So let's say theoretically tzemer at that point in time was $100, and the value of the object, and now it would be $140. Because the price of wool, there's a scarcity in wool, so now wool is more expensive. Even though it's more expensive now, he only has to pay the value of the wool from when it was stolen. And that ties right into what we were saying in the pasuk, V'heshif esag zela asher gazal. If he can't return the object like it was when he stole it, he has to pay for the object like when he stole it. Okay. Alright. So we have a very clear hasaga here of what the first case of the Mishnah is. Very basically, he took raw materials and he made a finished product out of it. So the question there becomes, to what extent does he have to make a finished product? And we'll see Tosas talk about that and the Gemara talk about that much later on. But the question that we should have on the first case of the Mishnah is, does he need to steal something and create it into such an object that the actual name of the object is changed? Or is it enough that the physicality of it has changed? To give an example, let's say I took boards and shaved them down with a plane, but it is still a board. I have subtracted from the board content, okay, but it's still called a board. Is that called a shinoi, or is it only when I take the boards and make them into something, for instance, a cupboard, a drawer, a shelf, something like that? It's a finished product, okay? So we'll have to see that later on. Let's look at the second case of the Mishnah. So, second case of the Mishnah says as follows. Gazal para mu'uberes. A Gazlan takes a cow that is pregnant. V'yolda. And now in the Gazlan's rishus, this pregnant cow gives birth. Continues the Mishnah, Rachel te'una v'gazaza. Let's say the Gazlan stole a sheep that was ready to be sheared. It had a full coat of wool on it. V'gazaza, and he sheared the sheep. Mishalim demei para ha'umedes liyalid. He pays the value of a cow that is expecting to give birth, or is you could say anticipatory. He pays the value of the cow as if it's anticipated that it will give birth in the immediate future. That would be the literal translation of this section of the Mishnah. And we'll see why that's important later on. Okay, v'dimei Rachel ha'omedes legazes. Once again, the Mishnah repeats that if he steals the tzemer from the, if he shears the sheep, he pays the value of a sheep that is ready to be sheared. Okay, well, let's stop here. Okay, because we just got a lot of information. The first thing is that there's some sort of status change when an animal gives birth and when a sheep is sheared. Okay, so I think you could say al pnei hadvarim, that similar to the first case of the Mishnah, when you take something and you make something else out of it, that creates a shinui. Okay? So in the case of the pregnant cow, he took a pregnant cow, and now it's a cow and a vlad and a calf. Okay? So it was once something, and now what was once one entity now became two entities. Okay? And the same thing by the sheep. Normally, let's say you gave your dog a haircut. Those shearings aren't anything. It's garbage. It's zevel. But when you take a sheep and you shear it, those shearings are now called something else. They have value. It is a recognizably valuable object. Okay, so the Mishnah says in that situation, you pay the value of it before it gave birth, right? Mishalim demei para homedes liyalim. It says you pay the value of the cow right before it's about to give birth. Dahainu. And this is important. The Mishnah seems to say that there's a status change in the cow because you pay the value of a cow that's ready to give birth. Okay? That would be the most simplest way to read this Mishnah. Okay? That there is some sort of shinoi in the cow. V'chein, you also see that by the Rachel. Mishalim demei Rachel ha'omedes ligazes. You pay the value of a sheep that is ready to be sheared. You don't pay the value of, or value difference between the wool that hasn't been sheared and has been sheared. I'm sure there's some sort of value change because the work has been done. I'm assuming they pay people who, or it's worthwhile, it takes work, takes time, there's a value established with that. So we don't pay that, we pay the value of the sheep that is ready to be sheared. Okay. So the question we should be having on the mitziasa of the Mishnah, the middle case of the Mishnah, what has changed here? Okay, it's still the same sheep and it's still the same cow. If you had a name, this is called Betsy. This cow is still Betsy even though it has given birth. This sheep is still Betsy even though it has been sheared. So what status change has exactly happened in the animal if we are correct? Okay, so Misvara, we would not say like this reading of the Mishnah. If you look at things from a logical perspective, if you were to tell me, or if the Mishnah had read like this, let's say it reads like this: Paramu beres v'yolda, Rachel tu'una v'gazuza, Mishalim kishasa gzela. If the Mishnah had simply said that, I would very easily understand that misvara, there's no actual change that happens in the animal itself. You sheared it, it gave birth, mazel tov. It's still bet, right? So, from a Sephardic perspective, we would say that the shinui happens in the vlad, or the giza, and that the vlad, you pay the value of the ibor, of the fetus, at the time that it was stolen. Because this fetus is no longer a fetus, it's a calf. So shinui has happened in the fetus. V'chein, by the tzemer, by the wool, when he steals the wool, there isn't a change in the status of the animal, but there is a change in the status of the wool. Because what was once called the hair of the animal is now called wool, right? If I went to fabric shop and I was looking for a sheet of wool, that's different than going to a farmer and saying, I want your shearings, right? There's a difference between the two things. So the Mishnah would be telling me in such a situation that you pay the value of it kishas gazela. So there is a certain appreciation in the value of the wool over time as it grows and becomes thicker. So you pay the value of it. You pay the value of it from the time that you stole, not from the time that it's matured. The wool has matured. So we have to deal with, what does it mean, omedis li'aled ve'omedis li'gazes? Also, a simple question. Is there that much of a value difference between Shas Hamada B'din and the time that the Mishnah describes of omedis li'aled? Meaning, my nafkamina, once the wool is ready to go, once I understand the hatinach in the case of the vlad, because there's a sakana involved in giving birth on all biological levels, but by the shearings, my nafkamina really shasamada b'din, and I guess there's a small value or some sort of work value. That's what the Mishnah would be telling me. There's some sort of work value, and you subtract that from that value from the total sum that the gross loss, and the Gazlan has to pay back without that additional value included. So the mahalach I'd like to say is, because it's very hard to understand that that a para is now different because it's given birth. And it's also very hard to understand that the sheep, now that it's been sheared, there's a shinui in the sheep. Okay? So we learned from the first case of the Mishnah that, we made the diuk of kalim. It has to be kalim. There has to be a name change in the object that was stolen. So if we'd like to continue in that fashion, we're going to have to say that the Shinoi needs to create some sort of change in status, a recognizable change in status. That's how I'd like to define it. So in this case, the only recognizable change in status we can identify is the Vlad and the Giza. Okay. All right. So third case of the Mishnah, and then we will finish up for the day. Okay, Hagozel para v'nisabra Eitzim. The Gazlan steals in a para rekanis. The cow is not pregnant. V'nisabra Eitzim, and it becomes pregnant in the Gazlan's rishus. V'yolda, and it gives birth. Rachel v'nitana Eitzim. If he steals a recently sheared sheep, and the Giza grew by him, v'gazaza, and he shears that Giza, mishalim kishas hagzela. He pays like the time that which was stolen. Okay, so the third case of the Mishnah has a clear difference, almost immediately recognizable to the second case of the Mishnah. The third case of the Mishnah is Masayim with Mishalim Kishas Hagzela. It does not say Mishalim Dmei Para Medis Lialed, Dmei Rachel Haumedis Lugazes. It says Mishalim Kishas Hagzela. So the first thing you should be trying to do in the third case of the Mishnah is to identify what is the practical difference, what is the nafkamina between the second and third cases of the Mishnah. So let's look closely. So it says here that instead of stealing a pregnant cow and the status change being created through birth, it says the status change is becoming pregnant in the Gazlan's rishus. So, whereas the second case of the Mishnah, there was already an ibor, it was already be'ain, and the para gave birth to it. You can almost look at it as sort of an automatic thing in most circumstances. A cow is pregnant, chances are it's going to give birth. Okay? I don't know the statistics of cow pregnancies and stillbirths, but I could assume that there's a pretty good chance that if a cow gets pregnant, it's going to give birth. Okay? In the same situation by the sheep. This was already, this sheep was already ready to be sheared. So the normal course is sheep need to be sheared when their hair grows out or comes to full maturity. And so therefore it is part of the normal process of taking care of the animal, besides the fact of producing wool, is to shear the sheep. Okay. So, whereas in the third case of the Mishnah, there is no hechrech to say that a pararekanis will become pregnant. Mi yomer, maybe the bilim will lock it up and it will be completely secluded, and then it will die natural causes without ever becoming pregnant. You can't say that practical difference by the Rachel, because the Rachel by nature will continue to grow hair, okay? But we can at least establish there's a clear difference in the para v'nisabrates, that there's a physical change that happens to the para that is unexpected, okay? Or maybe we could say it in a different way. there is a physical change to the animal of that which did not exist earlier. So, whereas the second case, the Ibur existed and it was a matter of memela that it would become a Vlad. In the third case of the Mishnah, there's no davar memela. It takes, or there's no davar be'ain that develops. So both in the third case, Lagabe the para, and the sheep, the idea being that there is something now in existence that did not exist before this change happened. So in such a case, you always go back to the Shas Gezelim. Okay. So the second case of the Mishnah, if we can just do some Chazara, the Mishnah Dafka inputted that you pay Gazal Para Dmei Para Amedis Lialed, but Dmei Rachel Amedis Ligaz is clear. Lashon change in the Mishnah or departs from the first case and the third case. So it's pretty clear that the distinction here is there's a difference between when something is created from that which didn't exist before and something that is already in existence that has a status change. And that is that when does the Torah mechayev the damim to go back to the Shas Gezela? That is only in a situation when the newly found object did not exist before. But if it existed before and had a status change happen to it, as something that happens as the natural course of its existence, then you pay Rega Echad before that change happens. And we could say that the svara would be as follows. When somebody takes boards and makes kalim out of it, that is a Maisa Yadayim. It's something that he did with his hands. As opposed to the pregnant cow that gives birth, he did no Maisa Yadayim. There was nothing that he did, no pu'ula. But there was a change in status to an object. So the Mishnah establishes two clear parameters. One is a parameter of when you change something biyadayim, and the other is a parameter of when a status change happens to something, and that is an existential status change, regardless of doing a Maisa Yadayim. Okay? So the next question is, let's play devil's advocate for a moment here. Let's say the middle case is he is kona the para and the rachel. Let's say ותנינא that there is a status change in the guf of the animal when it is sheared and when it gives birth. If that's the case, then we need to ask ourselves, is the third case of the Mishnah superfluous? Idea being, if I know that an already pregnant cow, when it gives birth, that is enough to be kona the guf of the para, even though theoretically it's the same animal. Al achas Kammah Kamma would I know that if I steal a para rekonis and it becomes pregnant and gives birth, then Zicher am kona the guf of the para. Okay? So why is the third case of the Mishnah necessary? Okay. to which we can say bedichoi, and it's kind of schwer a little bit, but we can say the Mishnah was just coming along to tell me the difference between rega echad before the Leda and shas gezel. There's a difference between the two cases, okay? So without the Mishnah coming along to the third case, I would have assumed that I may have assumed incorrectly that in any case where behemoths are being behemoths, so there would be no difference. Anything that happens as during the course of an animal's life, as long as he didn't actually do a ma'aseh yadayim, is called mimela, and then you would only pay rega echad before the leda. It's a little difficult, but that's what we're going to have to say, playing devil's advocate at this point in time. Okay, so just to finish up and be Masayim the Mishnah, we have Zah Klal. This is the rule. Kol hagazlanim mishalmim kishas hagazela. Every gazlan pays kishas gazela. So, l'chayra, at first glance, this would go on every case in the Mishnah. You always pay like the time that the ma'aseh gazela was done. Now, in the second case of the Mishnah, according to our one side that he is not kind of the para, we would say that that the shas gazela, when it happens memela, is when the change happens, the status change happens. And on our other side, it works out really well. The other side is to say, he's actually kind of the para or the rachel, so in that case, still the same rule applies the star of memela, and that is the shas gazela. With that, we're going to be Masayim for the day, or for the week. Next week's Mar Makarmis. So I want you to look at Rashi. I want you to look carefully at the second Rashi. There's an Muke Yosef. You should see. It's right at the beginning of the Perek here. Let me just find the Diburei Hamaskil for you. Okay, it's right on the Mishnah. Hagozel, Mishalim Kishas Gazela, Demei Eitzim, Demei Tzemer, Vein Achayiv, La'achsir, La'eskim, Dekana Loi, Beshinoi, Demei Para, Kasav Hara'ah, B'Shem Rabbi Zal. That's what you should cover. And we should start taking a look, Be'ezer Hashem Yisbarach, pretty soon. If you can start the rush, Simon Gimel, that would be the extra credit for next week's Shiur. Shkayach Rabbeisai, and I hope you enjoyed the Shiur. Take care for this week, and I'll see you Be'ezer Hashem next week.